Alright, it's time for another update and forecast on the various wildfires going on in California. First thing we always do is just take a look at the satellite imagery, and as of right now, it looks like that forecast we were talking about yesterday kind of came true. We were talking mostly yesterday about how we were going to have weaker winds throughout the day today, and how that was going to allow that smoke just to settle down over the fires. And it looks like that's exactly what happened throughout most of the day today. Instead of that smoke being pushed into Nevada, Idaho, or Oregon, you notice how, especially over the river complex, the two different parts of the Dixie Fire, and then the Caldor Fire as well, that smoke just settled down over the fires much more than in previous days. Now, realize the volume was on the other screen that I have open to look at the live chat, so I'll turn that off real quick. And that is one thing I'll say about this live stream compared to other ones. I'm hoping this one will be a little bit more interactive than other ones, so I'll try to keep my eye on the live chat today, whereas in the past I usually try to just get the information out there as fast as possible in as concise way as possible. Today I'll try to answer some more of your questions that might be popping up in the live chat. So just looking at the imagery right now, as I was saying, that smoke settling down over the fires, I always think that's actually a good thing. You might not think so if you're worried about air quality or concerned about the ability to use aircraft on the fires, but whenever you get a smoke inversion like that over your fires, it typically has the impact of calming the fire down somewhat. When you get that thick smoke, less heat can come in, so the fuels aren't heated up as much, and then usually when you don't have that big of a temperature contrast, then you get less afternoon winds as well. So overall, looked like we had calm behavior throughout most of the day, and I was actually almost leaning towards not doing a video this evening, but you can see that in the last 30 minutes, it looks like that one smoke plume on the Dixie Fire on the southeastern edge right here, and some parts of the Caldor Fire appear to be starting to break through that smoke inversion now. And as we've seen in the past, occasionally when that happens, where if the fire is able to break through that smoke inversion, then it can really pick up in activity over the next couple of hours. So that's why we are taking a closer look at these fires as of right now, regardless of the calmer behavior that they had earlier today. So basically, key takeaway there, calm behavior throughout most of the day, but looks like the Dixie Fire and Caldor Fire have now broken through that smoke inversion, so we'll likely see an increase in activity over the next couple of hours. So I see somebody just said, Cal Fire just had an update on the Caldor Fire. That was part of the timing for me starting this video. I wanted to make sure that I watched what they were saying first, and just in case you missed that Caldor update, I can just briefly kind of go over some of the key points that they were talking about. So one key point that I would say was good to hear, throughout the time when we've been looking at the Caldor Fire and this fire perimeter map, this western edge, we've seen those hotspots popping up there almost every single day. Let's see if they're, yeah, so those hotspots right there where at first glance, it looks like it's a huge concern. It looks like the fire has moved into these structures, but as you might have just heard in that Caldor update that happened not too long ago, what those hotspots are were actually their firing operations, where they're actually purposely burning out some of the fuels in this area to basically reduce the risk around those structures in the future. So that kind of confirmed what our suspicions were over the last couple of days, that those hotspots were in fact firing operations, not just wildfire going through these communities. So that was one of the best things to hear throughout the Cal Fire update. The other good news seemed to be on that southern edge. You can see basically no hotspots on that southern edge anymore, and that is an area of the fire where we do have most of our containment that we have on the Caldor Fire is on that southern edge right there. You see the black line there. You also see the black line on that western edge there. That's where the fire is considered contained. And then one other thing that they said in that Caldor update was that they're expecting this area right here to be turned into that black line over the next couple of days, if even not within the next 24 hours because of the success they've had in all their suppression efforts and structure protection in that area right there. So just keep an eye on. Can you show the fire that made Sonoma evacuate? Sorry, I don't know what the fire is called. So that is interesting because I didn't know there was any fire in Sonoma right now. See if there's any live hotspots. Not seeing any live hotspots pop up. Oh, I read that as Sonoma. It was Sonora. So the Washington fire. So that is, I believe I actually already have the link up for that one. Somewhere right here. Washington, nope. We'll just go right to the Cal Fire page where I know we'll be able to find it. Incidents. And Washington Fire looks like it's 81 acres as of this evening and 10% contained. If that is, yeah, that's what the next person was saying right there. I believe that Washington Fire was the one just southeast of the Airola fire. So we could take a look and see if there's any hotspots on that one right now. So there's the Airola, so that one should be the Washington right there. And looking at any current hotspots, doesn't look like there's any current hotspots coming off of that right now. So that is some good news there if you are concerned about that one. But with that being said, we have seen that this type of map isn't always perfect, as we actually were just talking about on the Caldor Fire, where it looks like those hotspots have moved into these communities. So with that being said, on the Washington Fire, I would always stay updated with your local resources and information. Don't just take my word for it when we say that it's looking good in that area. So the other spot that they were saying was looking relatively good on the Caldor Fire was this northern section here. That's where you can see there's not many hot spots, and they said it's basically up on a ridge, so they're trying to get some crews in there just to stop it in its place. But then where they were saying there has been some challenges was on this northern side right here. They said they had a number of spot fires the last couple of days. You can see all that activity we had there, and if we turn on the live hotspots, you can see that is an area where we do still have some activity going on. Now the good news to hear was that it sounds like as of right now they've had some success on this part of the fire right there, and that was terrific to hear because that's, I would say, the part of the fire that we are the most concerned about. You think about this northern edge right here where that live hotspot looks like it is right now. That, like, if you're thinking about all of these structures right here, it's very unlikely that this hotspot would be able to go over where you see the fuels change right here. It goes from dark green to almost this whitish color. That means it's going to be going from that dense forest where it's all critically dry fuels to where it's, I believe, mostly granite up here. So that northern edge should actually stop once it gets out of these fuels and into this more rocky terrain. So what we've been talking about as the big concern over the last couple of days is this section right here, because you can see that that has a much clearer path to a lot of these structures where it looks like there's a more horizontal continuity of the fuels moving through there. It doesn't just move through rocky terrain right there. So that has been our big focus throughout really the last 3 or 4 update and forecast videos, because you can see all those structures there, and the predominant wind direction in the afternoons is usually from the southwest. But Cal Fire was just saying that they've had some reduced behavior in this section over the last couple of days, so that's allowed them to get a lot of resources into this area, try to get some good dozer lines. They said that tonight they actually plan on doing a firing operation to clear out some of these fuels. So that's some good news there. They call it a catcher's mitt, where you create just a whole line of containment lines and firing operations as well, so that if the fire does move into there, it's just basically caught by that containment line and then doesn't hopefully move any farther. Now, the big concern on the Caldor Fire, though, we've talked about this for a number of days, is that over the next couple of days we have this ridge building over California. That's going to be keeping conditions It's actually going to be making things warmer and drier, which you would think is very bad for wildfire, and that could lead to some increases in activity in some places. But the big concern moving forward for the Caldor Fire is Monday into Tuesday, as I'll go back just in case you missed it. So right there, ridge builds in, that makes it warmer and drier, but it leads to reduced winds, which I think is actually the biggest thing when it comes to fire spread. And then as we get into Monday and Tuesday, you can see this more trough-like pattern building in, and that's where we're going to have some gusty winds. That's really the big story that we're going to continue to follow over the next 4 to 5 days. You can see the winds tomorrow afternoon. You might still think that's gusty, up to 25 mile per hour gusts, but comparatively that's much less than we've had in the past. And then Sunday we get the first little traces of that trough starting to push in. Wind gusts get up to 30, and then Monday is when the strong winds really start to pick up, getting above 35 miles per hour, and in some cases, depending on where you pick that point right there, we were seeing some forecasted wind speeds of 40 to 45 miles per hour, and unfortunately that will be continuing, if not even picking up into Tuesday afternoon. So the reason that's the big concern on the Caldor Fire is you can see the direction that those are coming from the southwest. So what that will try to do when it comes to this fire is move that fire towards the northeast. So that's why Cal Fire has made this such a large priority. Luckily the winds are cooperating over the next couple of days, so they have a little time to prepare for that big wind event, and they certainly are preparing. Just looking at, I purposely retweeted this one so that I'd be able to pull it up in this video. You can see a multitude of fire resources are in the community of Strawberry, working hard defending structures, and I know that that's been the case on this northeastern section for a number of days. They've had a lot of resources in here doing basically everything they can to get ready for that wind event. So the good news is the winds are going to be calm over the next couple of days, so they have some time to really prepare for that wind event. The bad news is, and I think the thing we'll be watching the closest as we move forward, is the possibility of spot fires going over those containment lines. That's something that we saw on the Dixie Fire, where we had an amazing firing operation around the entire northern end of the perimeter, and then spot fires just took some burning embers, dropped them over the firing operation, and then the fire grew rapidly after that. So that's the big thing that we're going to be watching on Monday evening and into Tuesday evening as well, to make sure those spot fires don't jump over all of the progress that they were able to make over the next couple of days before that wind event comes in. So that will continue to be the area of the Caldor Fire that we watch the closest. But as I said, relatively good conditions both yesterday and for most of today, although it does look like things are starting to pick up a little bit in the last half hour. But the overall story for the Caldor Fire today was that smoke inversion was in place, which kept you can see where that firing operation happened right there on the western edge. But smoke inversion over us, so that kept the temperatures down a little bit, kept our winds down a little bit, so kept the fire behavior down. And if we want to look at what the Caldor Fire actually looked like today, you can see how thick that smoke was. So the bad news on this is when you're not able to use as much aircraft. I did see a couple reports that aircraft was minimal on the Caldor Fire because of this reduced visibility. But where the good news comes in is one of the big factors that leads to fire behavior is heat. And if you imagine solar radiation trying to break through all that smoke right there, it'd have a pretty hard time. And that's something that we've seen on our wildfires throughout the season, where forecast might be for 95 degrees and then it only ends up being 70 degrees because that smoke is so thick. But with all that being said, it does look like we're starting to see a little more activity in the last 30 minutes. I almost want to see if the natural color fire shows an increase in activity. We'll also probably be able to see that firing operation on the western edge once this loads up. It might take a second here because I have about 50 tabs open. But let's see if we see that firing operation on the west here. Yeah, right there you can see the firing operation where it glows orange, and then just starting to pick up a little bit. We'll have to keep our eye on this throughout the course of the live stream. But yeah, it does look like it's a bit stronger than it was earlier in the day, but comparatively speaking, that's about the best as we've seen the Caldor map look, I think, since I've started following it. Remember the first day I followed it, it started as a couple little hotspots here and then grew from about 6,000 to about 50,000 acres throughout the course of a day, and this whole entire area was glowing bright red. So pretty good to see that the hotspots over the Caldor Fire right now appear to be pretty minimal. So when it comes to the numbers for the Caldor Fire, let's see if they've updated these yet. Usually they don't until, yeah, it looks like they updated at 5:30. So we just got it in time. Looks like the acres is up to about 144,000 acres, 12% containment. When we're looking at that containment again, it's mostly on that southern edge and that western edge right there. But the good news is they're predicting that they'll pick up some more containment on this western finger right here, hopefully over the next 24 hours. So that is going to be something to watch moving forward, and I expect we'll start to get some more up here as well now that they had that successful firing operation in place in that area. Now, also when it comes to that acreage burn that we were looking at, this is a good map to look at which shows how this fire has progressed over time. You can see it started down here, you'd call that the ignition point, and then ever since then it has just been growing mostly to the northeast. A lot of this activity right here in the recent days where you see that purple color, so green is where it originally was, that purple color is where it has burned more recently, red is kind of the in-between there. A lot of that I believe is actually due to their firing operations where they're purposely clearing out some of the fuels, but all of this growth to the northeast is just what the fire has been doing on its own, and right there you can see that spot fire that was able to jump Highway 50 that does continue to pose some challenges, but again, the key thing that we've been looking at is this section right here, so it's good to hear that as of right now, it's been calmer over the last couple of days, and that the containment lines they have in place as of right now appear to still be holding. So that, I would say, is some good news there, but it's also a little cause for concern, something that we're certainly going to have to watch moving forward to truly, really hope that the progress they're able to make over the next couple of days stays intact when that big wind event comes in Monday and Tuesday. Now, when it comes to evacuation orders and warnings, I purposely don't stay updated with these because a lot of people watch these videos after the live stream, so I don't want to put out any information right now that ends up being not true in about 5 hours, but I do put the links in the description to all of the best sources for you to go for it. The big two, Cal Fire and InsaWeb, and then you just look for the fire that you're interested in, and usually you can find just the long list of the most recent evacuation warnings and orders. But as for right now, I will just briefly show the Caldor map. It does look like there has been some extensions up in this northeastern section. That yellow color is where there's evacuation warnings, where it's saying basically prepare to evacuate. Honestly, I think everybody in California should almost have some kind of preparation or some plan in place just in case of wildfires breaking out. But where you see that red right there, that is where there is mandatory evacuation orders. So that link, I believe I've put it in the link in the description as well. Now when it comes to the damages and losses, you can see that there has been 650 structures destroyed on the Caldor Fire, but I will say that we haven't seen this number increase significantly in the last couple of days, and the increases we did have, I believe, were just old information finally coming in. When it comes to, you can really see where some of those structures were that are under this fire perimeter. Most of it is in that Grizzly Flats area right there, and if we look at the fire progression map, you can see that that burned almost at the first 2 days of this fire. It was the 15th and the 16th that we burned through that Grizzly Flats area, so I think the recent increases in the structures destroyed is actually the damage assessment teams bringing back some of the information on what already burned. It's not new structures continuing to burn. Now, where the good news comes in is how many resources we have on this fire. We have 25 helicopters, 250 engines, 71 dozers, 63 water tenders, almost 3,000 personnel at this point, and 82 crews. So lots of resources on this. We see that continuing to pick up every day. And just as I was showing on my Twitter page right here, those resources are really focusing on that northeastern section. So if we've been talking about that northeastern section of the Caldor Fire for about 3 or 4 days now, because that's where the fire has been seeing most of its growth recently, has been to the northeast. And then that's also where we're going to have that big wind event coming in Monday and Tuesday. You can imagine that Cal Fire probably saw this coming over a week ago. So they do have a lot of those resources that we have on this fire working hard in that area to make sure that this fire doesn't move into Tahoe. But with that being said, given that wind event, we are going to have to watch it very closely because we've seen what kind of spot fires can happen when you get 35 to 40 mile per hour winds. So I heard a couple firefighters were injured. Any update on them? I actually don't know about any firefighter injuries, but I'd have to check up on that. That's a good thing for me to look into in the future. So yeah, so just getting back here, the one thing I do want to show, I know people always love to see the Wharf S-Fire wildfire simulation. Just in case you're new to this live stream or to this channel, I'll briefly explain what this is. This is the Wharf S-Fire wildfire model that we run out of the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. It's one of the top wildfire models in the world. It basically combines the fire perimeter and those active hotspots with the fuel, weather, topography variables. And then what sets this model apart is then it also simulates how the wildfire is going to create its own weather, and then how that weather is then going to impact the wildfire. So before I click play and we see where the model is predicting growth over the next 48 hours, or where it predicted growth throughout the day today, and then where it's predicting growth throughout the day tomorrow, I will remind you it is an experimental forecast only, and consistently for this model, it's been over predicting growth, because one of the things that I always say is it doesn't take into account the fire suppression tactics. So if you see a massive amount of growth here, we're likely to see less growth than this is actually simulating, thanks to the fact that we have almost 3,000 personnel on this fire. But I actually haven't seen this yet either, so we'll be watching this for the first time together. You can see throughout the day today, looks like it was mostly predicting, you saw it early on, it was predicting majority of the growth in that northern area right there, which seems to be the case throughout the day today. Also seeing some of that activity on this eastern edge and that northern edge right there. So if we just pause that was the simulation for the day today. If we want to look at the active hotspots to see how the model appears to be doing, I would say that was pretty spot on. Saw that growth on the northern edge right there, and then also on that southeastern edge as well was where the model was predicting most of the growth today, and that seems to be where most of the growth did end up actually happening right there. You can see where it was predicting the growth today if I go back and forth right there. And then now we can look at what it is predicting for the day tomorrow. So day tomorrow, we are looking at the fire weather forecast with that ridge coming in. It will be warmer and drier, but another day of relatively weak winds. So it looks like it's predicting fairly similar conditions to what it had today. Most of that growth on the north and southeastern edges of the fire. But right there, that kind of sums up what I was saying earlier about how it doesn't take into account the fire suppression tactics, because you notice it has all this growth on the western edge right there, and I think the model is thinking that the hot spots that we're seeing on that western edge right now are active parts of the wildfire, but as we know, it's actually firing operations, so it's very unlikely that that growth on the western edge would happen because that's actually purposely planned fire. Now, I also think it's over predicting growth on this northern edge right here because, again, that's an area where Cal Fire has been focusing a lot of their resources, and so far our containment lines have been holding. And if we look at the forecast for tomorrow, and especially when it comes to the winds, doesn't look like there's going to be anything that allows the fire to get absolutely out of control throughout the day tomorrow. Especially if we get another one of those smoke inversions like we had throughout the day today, where that is another factor that can calm the fire behavior down as well. But I will say that that will be something that we have to watch closely as we move forward, but especially as we get into Monday and Tuesday, where that big wind event does come in. So that pretty much sums up the Caldor Fire right there. I want to just take a brief look at the Dixie Fire because based on the satellite imagery, similar story to the Caldor Fire, had those smoke inversions earlier in the day, but in the last 30 minutes appears to be picking up in intensity, and especially on that southeastern section of the fire right there. So just looking, I want to see how active the hotspots look. Yeah, so that southeastern section definitely looking more active than the last time I loaded this page. A couple more hotspots showing up there. Interested to see what direction the winds are going. Yeah, so it looks like that smoke plume is mostly going to the northeast, which means your winds are mostly coming from the southwest, which would act to push this fire a bit farther up towards the northeast right there. So I guess that might be your silver lining. At least the winds aren't coming from the southeast, which would be pushing it closer towards Taylorsville. But definitely looks like it has been picking up over the last 30 minutes. So I see somebody just said, no, those heat spots on western edge are real hot spots. No firing operations. Fire moving towards Somerset. Firefighters helping people get out. So if that is true, then that kind of justifies why I always say, always stay updated with your local resources first. The reason I was saying that these were firing operations was because I just watched the Caldor update. That was about an hour ago, and that's what they were saying. But things change. We've seen that throughout this wildfire season. That is actually why I tried to change to a more interactive format like this, because things can change very rapidly. It was actually the Greenville night that made me change how I do these live streams. In the past, I would just get all of the tabs ready, and then I would research the fires for maybe 1 or 2 hours, and then just go through everything I'd learned. And when I finished that update that night, I finished it up, and in the last hour, the fire had completely changed direction and had moved through Greenville. And I was just seeing post after post on Twitter about it and had missed it throughout the entire live stream, possibly even giving a false sense of security in some cases. So that is why we do a more interactive format like this, where I do keep my eye on the live stream, because you guys do have some helpful comments sometimes about different cams to look at, other information that you may have been picking up. So interesting. Somebody said, containments on Division Juliet have not been holding. Fire winds causing slopovers everywhere. So let's see if we can see which one is Juliet. So right there. So I do remember that in the Caldor update that they said there were some spot fires coming up, and they were trying to use some aircraft to figure out where those heat signatures were. I think what I'm mainly saying is that the fire itself hasn't moved past those containment lines, the bulk of the flames at this point. If you look at the hotspots right now, it certainly looks, if we look at where the previous fire perimeter was, right there, key area that we're concerned about is right about there. And if we look at the hotspots right now, looks like most of that activity is up towards the north. But again, this map, you can sometimes take it with a grain of salt. So we are going to have to continue to stay updated on all the different local resources that are going on. So just trying to look here. Notice Juliet comment, he's a dozer guy on 50. So Juliet. Yeah, so he says, been dozer bossing at Scouts Creek at Highway 50 on the northeast finger of the Caldor. Extremely challenging ground to build dozer line on my 24 off. Yeah, definitely some very challenging conditions out there. I have huge respect for all the wildland firefighters out there. If you can actually kind of see how steep a lot of this terrain is in this region. It really doesn't do it justice just looking at this map, but you can see how rugged and steep some of this terrain is. Also lots of very critical fuels in this area. I was also seeing some reports where there were some big wind events previously that knocked down a lot of the fuels, which makes it even harder to get through some of these regions. But yeah, as I was saying, that northeastern section right there is the key spot on the Caldor. We are going to continue to watch as we move forward. So getting back, I was briefly moving up to the Dixie Fire up here. So northern section right there looks a bit calmer than it has in previous days. It's also good to see that there aren't that many structures around that area. But so I think key area on the Dixie Fire continues to be this area right here where we do see a larger amount of structures. But compared to 3 days ago, this is looking better because about 3 days ago we had those hotspots moving right up against these structures right here. And I believe they were able to hold it, keep it out of Taylorsville. But as you can see, it looks like it's moved farther away from Taylorsville at this point. So that seems to be moving in the right direction. But in the last 30 minutes, it does look like we're starting to see more activity pick up on that southeastern section of the Dixie Fire. So that is an area that we're going to have to keep a close eye on, even throughout the course of this live stream as we move forward. So just looking at the Dixie map again, I do also just want to report on some of the good news coming out of the Dixie Fire as well. There was points where we had hotspots coming down to these structures on Lake Almanor. We had hotspots nearing the eastern area of Westwood. We had a finger that was pushing up towards Susanville. We had the spot fire that did end up moving into parts of Janesville and destroying some structures, but you can see in all of those areas right there, the fire has significantly calmed down. We do still have some smoldering areas in places, but we're not seeing those huge walls of flames like we were looking at on some of those nights from the Dyer Mountain camera. Not seeing that kind of activity in those critical areas anymore where we have just the thousands of structures right there. So that is also why I'm saying key concern on the Dixie Fire looks to still be that section right there. So I see somebody actually just commented about this. Old station now at risk on Dixie. Taylorsville holding so far, but hotspots moving closer. Quincy could be at risk now. So the one thing I will say about Quincy, I believe I have the map up right here. So if you look at where Quincy is, the good news is that this part of the Dixie Fire at least looks to be calmed down right there, and that's where we do have some containment on this northern and western side right there, which makes me think that they have some good lines around that area. Where the concern would be for Quincy is if this area of the fire were to come around from the east. But just given the wind direction right now, you can tell the wind direction based on the way the smoke is moving. The smoke seems to be moving to the east right there. So that would mean that the fire is pushing more up towards the northeast, which means that areas to the west of that would be in the opposite direction that the fire is moving. So right now we have the winds blowing in where this hot spot is right here, trying to move this fire up farther towards the northeast. But we do often see those winds turn around during the nighttime hours. So that is a good point to think about during the nighttime hours. If those winds turn around, pick up some burning embers, toss them down this way. So we will have to keep an eye on that area moving forward as well. Basically, that is the key area on the Dixie Fire that we're going to continue to look at. Now, I believe I had the camera of what's been going on in the Dixie Fire, and you can actually see, actually I'm going to reload this because we've really seen some of the activity pick up over the last 30 minutes. Going right here. So you'll see a couple instances here where the smoke plume pops up above this smoke inversion right here. Right there. So earlier in the day you can see how that smoke settled down. Big reason for that is when we have those weaker winds in, it allows that smoke just to settle down to the surface a lot more. When compared to those very windy days where we see the most fire activity, often in those days the smoke totally clears out and we end up seeing just giant smoke plumes popping up right there. There are a couple instances though where that smoke plume's trying to bust through the inversion, and then most recently, at least on the satellite imagery, it looks like it's started to break through that inversion even more. It looks like this confirms that as well. Might even be able to see it better if we reload it and just look at maybe the last hour instead of the last 3 hours. We should be able to see that recent activity a little bit better. Couple maybe pyrocumulus clouds popping up right there. So the trees are moving a little bit, so there is some wind in this area. Don't get me wrong, definitely still see those afternoon wind gusts, but it's at least better than some of those conditions in the past where it was 35 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts and a red flag warning. Now, the very end of this video, the smoke plume should start to pop up again through this inversion. Let's see if it happens right. Yeah, right about there. You can see it start to go. You can actually almost see it better on this map where it's calmer throughout the day, and then you really start to see it pick up over the last 30 minutes to the last hour. A lot more smoke coming off of that area right there. So coming back to the Dixie Fire numbers, that one is officially up to 750,000 acres. One thing that you will notice about that is in recent days we haven't seen massive increases in the acreage burn. You remember that one day where it grew about 15 miles right here? That day it burned about 100,000 acres. In the more recent days where you see that red color, that's what's been burning over the last couple of days right there. And if we zoom in there, you should be able to see yesterday it was about 4,000 acres burned. So certainly much better than those 114,000 acre days that we had in the past. But when it comes to the fire weather forecast, just like the Caldor Fire, there are some concerns moving forward. Reading through the Cal Fire Dixie Fire update, they're actually predicting an increase in fire activity over the next 2 days as those hot, dry conditions come in. The reason for those hot, dry conditions is this ridge that's building in over California, and there's almost 3 fire weather variables we always look at: temperature, winds, humidity. So 2 out of those 3 are going to be getting worse over the next 2 days. It's the temperature and the humidity. We're going to see temperatures go up into the high 80s on Saturday. Interested to see what they are on Sunday. Still in the mid 80s. Relative humidity still very dry in the single digits. Key reason that's important is because the drier the atmosphere is, the drier the fuels get, and then the easier it is for that fire to spread. But the one factor that's working in our favor is the wind gusts. You can see much calmer winds throughout the day tomorrow. On Sunday, we start to see those winds come up a little bit. It should update right there. So Sunday, we already start to see some of those stronger winds come in. But Saturday, it looks like we are going to be getting a little bit of a break with those winds. And usually it is winds that have the most crucial effects on wildfire. So it'll be very interesting to watch the Dixie Fire over the next couple of days to see if the fire activity picks up because it's warm and dry, or if it calms down because the winds themselves are calming down. But either way, come Sunday afternoon, we're going to see those same warm, dry conditions, but then the winds starting to pick up again, which is going to be cause for concern. Monday, that's where the real wind event comes in. That's where that ridge, where we get those weaker winds over California, moves out. We transition to this more trough pattern over Northern California, and with that, it's going to be bringing some very gusty winds up to 35 to 45 miles per hour from the southwest. So both Monday and Tuesday afternoon, we're going to have to keep a very close eye on basically all of the wildfires throughout California, but I think especially the Caldor and the Dixie, because there is the possibility for those to grow rapidly and get some spot fires that pushes the fire out of previous containment lines with the winds like that. So we've seen how spot fires can affect the Dixie Fire. Looking at this map, we had basically a firing operation around this entire northern edge right here, and then it was a very windy day just like that. It was about 35 mile per hour winds, where it was able to take some burning embers in here, throw it over those containment lines, that firing operation, and then you can see how much that fire grew that day, about 15 miles to the north. So not saying that that's going to happen when that wind event comes in, but it's certainly something we've seen happen in the past, and is something that we'll have to watch closely as we get into Monday and Tuesday. So with that being the fire weather forecast, now let's check and see what the WRF S-Fire wildfire model is predicted for the Dixie Fire throughout the day today. You can see most of that growth it was predicting early on is in the northern section there and that southeastern section. I would say that's pretty spot on for what we actually saw throughout the day today. Activity going on there, but especially in that southeastern section. Looks like this model pretty much nailed the fire growth for the day today, with most of it being in this area. That looks to be basically playing out in real time as of right now, with that southeastern section really starting to pick up as we get into the evening hours. And last 30 minutes, looks like we're starting to get that pyrocumulus cloud really starting to pop up right there. So just going back here, I want to see what it's forecasting for the day tomorrow, because this is actually going to be very interesting to see, because the forecast for tomorrow is a little tricky because it is going to be warm and dry, but we're also going to have weaker winds. It looks like it's still predicting growth in those same two areas, the northern edge right there and that southeastern edge right there. I think the concern is where it is that growth that's showing on the southeastern edge right there. But with that being said, this model doesn't take into account fire suppression tactics, so I don't actually expect us to see that much growth on the southeastern section right there. But as always, still great to see that around Lake Almanor, around Susanville, around Janesville, fire activity has significantly calmed down on the Dixie Fire. The area that we do still have to watch closely, though, is that hotspot to the southeast of Taylorsville. I know they've made that a top priority. They have lots of dozer lines, lots of structure protection. I heard they had an entire plumbing system to about every single... They were running water to every single structure in Taylorsville. Not exactly even sure what that means, but I know they've been preparing very well in this area, so we'll keep an eye on it, though, as we move forward. Now, one other area that we've been keeping a very close eye on, actually, before we look at another fire, I do want to make sure we look at the other numbers. 46% containment on the Dixie Fire. Always remember to stay updated with the local resources when it comes to evacuation warnings and orders. When it comes to structures destroyed, I don't think that has moved up in any of the recent days that we've been looking at it, but you can't see the overall damage on the Dixie Fire. 1,273 structures destroyed. But where the good news does come in is we still have a massive amount of resources on this fire. 19 helicopters, 365 engines, 172 dozers, 166 water tenders, almost 5,000 personnel. You notice that is down from previous days, but really not a big surprise there when you think about how much the Caldor Fire has grown recently, the threats that it might have for Lake Tahoe, and then also some of those new fires that have been popping up, like the French Fire, the Airola Fire, probably still not pronouncing that one right, and then some of the other even newer Southern California fires as well. So transitioning to some of those other fires, one of the key spots that we've been watching for quite some time now is the Monument Fire, and where it looks like those hotspots are starting to get closer to the area around Hayfork. If we look at the current hotspots, looks better than it did yesterday. And I would say the satellite imagery over the Monument Fire looks better than it did yesterday as well. Getting some good smoke shading from the river complex, which helps to keep fire behavior down on the Monument Fire. But with that being said, that is still closer than we'd like to see any hotspots to that many structures. So that is going to be a spot that we continue to watch moving forward. Also, I would say good to see it looks like it's calmed down some around the Burnt Ranch area and the Junction City area as well. But if we look at the winds that are forecasted to come in as we get into Monday and Tuesday, there are going to be some strong winds over. Let's just make sure we're looking. Let's go right to Weaverville. Oh, I'm actually very glad that we did this because it's coming from a different direction than we're going to be seeing on the Dixie Fire. On Dixie Fire, as we get into that wind event coming in Monday and Tuesday, actually Dixie and Caldor were both forecasting southwesterly winds with that event, but it looks like around the Monument Fire, it's more of a westerly, if not even northwesterly wind. So with that being said, that's where we will have to keep a very close eye on these structures to the east of the fire and Hayfork as well, as those strong winds start to come in Monday and Tuesday. So definitely going to keep a close eye there. When it comes to the Monument Fire, that one is up to 160,000 acres and 22% containment. There are a number of other fires in Northern California that we've been following for a couple weeks now. We had the Mcfarland Fire, the river complex. That's what most of that smoke being produced throughout the day today is from. And then Antelope Fire up there as well. That one looks like it's basically out at this point. So this might actually be the last time I include Antelope Fire in one of these updates. Starting to pick up over the last 30 minutes. But the river complex, that one's almost up to 100,000 acres. I would imagine, just based on how much smoke is coming off of it right now and how much activity we have had on that recently, I imagine we'll get to 100,000 by the end of the weekend. The containment is at about 9% there, or 19% there. The Mcfarland Fire, that's fire that's actually looked much calmer over the last couple of days. It's easier to find if we look at the fire perimeter. If we look at active hotspots right now, almost looks like nothing going on there anymore. Now, as always, stay updated with your local resources versus what I'm saying, especially when it comes to evacuation warnings and orders. But Mcfarland Fire is certainly looking much, much better than in previous days. And that's also some cause for confidence. 93% containment on the Mcfarland Fire, although that one did burn up to 122,000 acres. Now, the other one where we've had a lot of reduced activity over the last couple days is the Antelope Fire. That one's at 71,000 acres, but 42% containment there, and definitely seeing less heat coming off of that one than in previous days. Now, one fire that is relatively new to the ones we've been updating on is the French Fire down here. You can see that this is one that has been just stubbornly active over the last few days, and that's because it's not seeing as big of a break from those winds like we're seeing on the Dixie and Caldor fires. It's still seeing those strong afternoon wind gusts. It's even hotter down in this area as well, also very dry as well. And if we want to look at what it actually looked like throughout the day today, actually, before I play it, I'll show what this camera is pointing at. So you can see the lake right there to the east. That camera is pointing down to the south, kind of the southwest right there. So just getting our bearings on this map. Gotta scroll way down here at this point. So I believe the camera would be maybe like right up here looking down on this hot spot right here on the French fire where we are seeing that activity. So to actually see what that fire looked like throughout the day today, we can go right here. And you can see that this basically ties into what we were talking about with that satellite imagery, where fair amount of activity going on in the French fire throughout the day today. And big reason for that is, like I said, that the fire weather forecast really hasn't been cooperating there. So that's allowed the French fire to grow to about 23,000 acres and 19% containment. I'm actually interested to see what the forecast is looking like for the French fire this weekend. So if we put this in there, it'll take us right down to the French fire. And you can see what I was talking about, how they've still seen, getting back to today, still seeing those 25 mile per hour wind gusts, but the big thing is their temperatures have been in the 90s over the last couple of days. I think that's a big reason that they've been seeing a lot of activity on the French fire recently. But the good news is, when it does come to the French fire, is you can actually kind of see the terrain in this area going downhill to where we have the largest amount of structures here. And if you don't know, fires don't like to go downhill. When they're going uphill, the flames are kind of tilted towards the fuels, so it's able to preheat the fuels, and then it starts just growing rapidly uphill. So the exact opposite happens downhill. So it's one of the big things protecting these structures right here is the fact that it is downhill between them and the fire. So any fire behavior moving in that direction would be slowed by the topography. But with that being said, throughout the day tomorrow, it's going to be even hotter as that high pressure system continues to build in. You can see that high building in both Saturday and Sunday. What's going to be interesting is to see if they get those strong winds, because this fire is a bit farther, more southern into California. So in our northern California fires, like the Dixie Fire, the Monument Fire, and the Caldor Fire that we're looking at, when that trough comes in Monday and Tuesday, we're seeing some extreme wind gusts up to 35 to 45 miles per hour. But this one, you notice, is much farther away from that trough moving through. So I'm interested to see what kind of winds we're expecting to get for the French fire as we get into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So into Sunday, that's where we started to see winds pick up on the other fires. Looks like we're still in the 20s there. As we get into Monday, does look like the winds are coming up some, around 30 miles per hour. Tuesday looks like 30 to 35 miles per hour. So it does look like we're getting some strong winds over the French fire as we get into Monday and Tuesday, but I would say that it's looking less than the other fires where there's the possibility to 40 to 45 mile per hour gusts. So French fire, I would say still seeing some activity on that one. So that is going to continue to be a fire that we look at moving forward. Now, I think I already have it pulled up right here. So we had a number of other fires that we are covering this week. We had the South Fire right here. We had the Westward Fire right here. So I believe we have some good news on these ones. If we scroll down to this map. Now again, before I show this, I will remind you that always stay updated with your local resources about current evacuation warnings and orders. But if we look at South Fire right there, you can see why this one was such a big deal. When it first started, you can see the thousands of structures all around this. And I do believe it did end up destroying some structures. We'll take a look at that number in a second. But if we look at the active hotspots, not really seeing any heat coming off of it right now. I was looking at all the live cameras that I could find around this area. I wasn't seeing any significant smoke plumes, so looks like things have certainly been improving on the South Fire. And when it comes to the Westward Fire, might even be difficult to find on this map anymore. Yeah, the Westward Fire was somewhere around here, but you can see that since we didn't have any hotspots on that one yesterday, not showing up anymore on this map. So it looks like the Westward Fire is looking like it has improved as well. But South Fire remains at 900 acres, 10% containment, so not a big change from yesterday. But with that one, we did get 18 structures destroyed. Now, the other fire in that area was the Westward Fire. That one, you can see, kind of goes along with the satellite map. Basically looks like it's out right now, and it looks like that one is 95% contained. Did get up to 160 acres. Now, the other two fires that we were following, again, there's lots of different fires that we're following. We have the Washington Fire, which is at 81 acres burned, but 10% contained. And then the Airola Fire was doing this yesterday. It wouldn't let me click unless I zoomed way in. Airola Fire, probably not pronouncing that right, but 700 acres burned, 35% contained. Just looking at the satellite imagery, let's see if we can see any smoke coming up. Not seeing as much smoke from that area, although it is kind of hard to see because there's so much smoke from the Caldor Fire just drifting over California. And I guess we could look at that next, because if you don't live directly near any of these fires, that is probably one of the key things you're thinking about, is the smoke impacts. And you can see that as those winds have died down, this is something we were talking about for a number of days. As the winds die down, it allows that smoke just to settle down into California instead of just moving off into Nevada and Idaho. So unfortunately, the winds are going to be calming down even more as we get into the overnight hours. So a lot of that smoke that you can see being produced right now will continue to settle down into the Sacramento Valley and the Bay Area as well. But looking at it right now, you can see it already has pretty much done that. Unhealthy air throughout much of Northern California. Underneath the river complex, we have that very unhealthy air. And based on the increase in smoke over the last 30 minutes from the Caldor Fire, I imagine we transition back into that very unhealthy air over the Tahoe area as well. But we should start to actually see things improve. I wouldn't say we'd actually see them improve in Southern California yet, because we're likely to see some of this smoke actually finding its way all the way down there. You can see it's already starting to have a little northern push. But instead of guessing, we can actually just check the forecast to see where the forecast is expecting that smoke to be going over the next 24 hours. You can see most of that smoke being produced by the river complex, Dixie Fire, and Caldor Fire. And then you see that it looks much different than in previous days. In previous days, it was just going straight into Nevada, Idaho, and Oregon. But in this case, it's just settling down over California, directly over the Sacramento Valley. As those winds are calm overnight, that smoke will drop down to the surface. So most likely going to be waking up to some poor air quality tomorrow morning. So I'll just take a quick look at the live chat, see if there's any big questions popping up. Not seeing any big questions right there. So again, I just want to reiterate and go back over what I think is the top thing to follow, the top story to follow in California right now. It's what we've been following the closest over the last 3 or 4 days, and it is this northeastern section of the Caldor Fire. So big reason that that's such a concern is you can see how many structures we have to the northeast, and unfortunately the predominant wind direction is from the southwest. And if we look at the forecast moving forward, getting into Monday and Tuesday afternoon, we want to make sure we're looking at the right place, because that is still looking at the French Fire. So getting into Monday and Tuesday afternoon in that area southwest of Tahoe, we're expected to have some 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And you notice what direction it's coming from. It's coming from the southwest. So that would act to try to push this fire farther up towards the northeast. So that's certainly going to be the area we watch the closest over the next few days. What I'm hoping is that fire activity doesn't pick up any more than it has in the last 30 minutes. You can see that earlier in the day we had calm behavior, and then in the last 30 minutes to the last hour, seeing some increase on the Caldor Fire, but a large increase on that southeastern section of the Dixie. Seeing that pyrocumulus cloud pop back up right there. So key thing I'm going to be watching is the Caldor Fire tomorrow. Again, tomorrow, that's before this big wind event has come in. Tomorrow we still have relatively moderate winds, but then as we get into Sunday afternoon, we're already starting to see a little increase in our winds up to 30 miles per hour, and then the big story is going to come in Monday and Tuesday as we get those gusts up to 40 miles per hour, most likely going to have a red flag warning once that event does come in. So that again is going to be the thing that we're watching the closest over the next few days. So if you want to stay tuned with that, you can subscribe to Holt Hanley Weather, or just click the subscribe button as you're most likely watching this on YouTube right now or in the future, unless you're watching it on one of the other places where I repost these videos sometimes. But yeah, you can subscribe, and then also I'll try to be going live both Saturday and Sunday. I should be able to do early morning updates because I want to, or earlier in the day, because I want to get the forecast out before those afternoons come in, just in case there's any change in those wind forecasts. And then the big time to stay updated on all these fires again is going to be Sunday afternoon, where we start to see those winds come up, but then especially Monday and Tuesday afternoons, where the winds really come up and will most likely have a red flag warning as well. But I am the morning shift at KSBW tomorrow, which means I have to wake up at about 2 a.m. So I have to eat some dinner and get to bed early tonight. But I should be back tomorrow with another update and forecast on all these wildfires. So hopefully I will see you then. So big thanks to all the firefighters out there. Thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. And thank you for watching.